Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us tonight. And we'll be looking at a topic titled How Human Resources Can Develop Organizational Stability and Resilience During Period of Crisis and Uncertainty. Our facilitator tonight is Rita Babalola, and she is no stranger on this platform, but because of people who may just be joining us for the first time, I would just like to read about her profile. She has a degree, a master's in business administration from the Lagos State University. By her first degree, she has a degree in chemical sciences from University of Agriculture, Abeokuta. She started her career, just a minute. She started her career, my internet is acting up. All right, as a chemical analyst with 7-Up Bottling Company, and she moved on to Fountain Trust Bank, where she served for over 5 years in the banking function. Then she transited to Guaranty Trust Bank as relationship manager and coordinator. She spent about 6 years with that prestigious organization. And then subsequently, she became an executive director with Star Synergy Petroleum Services 2011, a position which she occupies till date. Also, in 2016, she became a co-founder of Beacon Gates Limited, a full-fledged HR consult and management consultancy services. Tonight, again, we have the privilege and pleasure of having on this prestigious platform, Rita Babalola. You have the floor.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Rita Babalola. Thank you, Mr. Adeosun, for having me on board today. I apologize for the seemingly lateness in starting. I thought I was going to do a beautiful analysis with my HR, different news for HR in different circumstances. I was going to use my historical work experience to relate to some organizational instability and how HR can practicalize such situations and bring them to life. So thank you for having me, and to the participants, please sit back and enjoy it. I'll be asking some questions in between. So the outline will take this form, the definition terms up to the end of it. We will talk, and then we'll be able to relate it to what is happening in the present times. So I put this as an introspection. Why should organizations cultivate resilience and stability during crisis? We know sometimes they say, man proposes, God disposes. Then there's another thing, if I So you dot all your I's and cross all your T's, and then you begin to thank God that you have done that very well. And then all of a sudden, government brings out a regulation. Everybody that is in logistics, now you have to register your bike. If the bikes are not registered, you cannot move on the road. Every bike is 1 million naira per registration. Or you sit down comfortably like what happened May 31st. I remember personally that I had increased salary effective May 1st. So by the time we were paying salary, my staff were practically like, what's the essence? The gain in the salary increase was just wiped up with the, with the tsunami that came with the fuel subsidy being removed. So those are things that you cannot control. So you have the ones that are intrinsic and you have the ones that are extrinsic. That is the one beyond your control, despite dotting all your I's and crossing all your T's. So we move back in retrospect to the definition of what the same today is just okay. So we are looking at the introduction now. Organizational stability. I know we've all heard of the word VULGA, it became more popular, though it's been something that has been done in the world. But I think for the Nigerian context, or some of us, we've never heard of the word VOGA. But it became more popular during the period of COVID-19, where we began to hear something like volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and the ambiguous environment, showing the world that sometimes, despite the fact that your organization, you have put all the systems, everything is working very well. But how do you pivot? There are some organizations, I think 7UP was one of the beautiful ones that we could see that manage their operation processes. 7UP, we all know that produced 7UP, but during the period of VOGA, what they did was also to produce Susure. They made use of the water system in their production system. They didn't need to go out of the production line. What they had just done was make use of some of the raw materials that they were using, and that they knew people at that period in time. We know the issue of sanitizer, we know the issue of face mask, and even Meccano came out with the nose mask. Meccano started producing nose mask, but then some organization could not pivot, neither could they change their internal processes to be able to adapt. HR may not have that function to be able to do that, but in terms of bringing on talents, in bringing on new people, the right people to help with the structure, the right people to manage and optimize the efficiency of the system, that is the work of the HR personnel. So whether you want to support the system, whether you want to make the system strike, whether you want the system to adapt to it, whether you want the system to grow or become more stable, most of the job will fall on HR. Why is this so? Number one, HR is the one that manages the people process. Everybody in the period of scarcity, in the period of crisis, we always want to go and meet the HR person. Let me use the word HR loosely. And then number two, in relating to people generally, most junior, most mid-level will not go to the senior management team. They will want to go to the HR department. HR department could be 2, HR department could be 5, could be a team of 6, it could be a team of 7 or 10. Everybody wants a connection with the HR department because they believe that they'll be the source of information that to take them into consideration. So they become like Radio Nigeria, they become like the normal people everybody needs to go to for information. So when you're talking about organizational stability, what do we mean by stability? It has to be stable. Stability is when an organization in itself becomes steadfast in its process. They can withstand disruption. They can withstand challenges and are able to stand despite all the issues. Sometimes there are economical issues that nobody can control. Sometimes there are man-made issues and there are natural disasters that come on at different phases of the life cycle of an organization. So if you remember during the period of, I think, the stock exchange, when this lady D, I think Ngozi Onye, I don't know, I can't pronounce the Igbo name, I can't remember, the lady that was in charge of Director General of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, you know, people were buying shares and they were selling, making margins, making money, and banks began to give them loan. But do you know that some stockbroking firm collapsed as the result of that? It wasn't what they wanted to happen. When they started the year, they didn't expect that to happen. But the systemic thing that happened in the stock exchange got affected and everybody just went in one fell swoop, wham. Even some of the banks also got affected in terms of their capital capital outlay. And I can remember very well that most of the banks that gave out loans for stockbrokers, for customers to buy stock, were affected. But just that most times banks are able to cover up their tracks. Then you have the organizational resilience. When you're talking about the resilience, it's just like when you have what makes an organization go band. It gives that effect of stretching it and then coming back to shape. Stretching it, coming back to shape. I remember when we were growing up, there's this thing, newsprint they call Daily Times of Nigeria. In trying to pivot in different ways, they were having internal challenges and they kept on working on it. They will bounce back. I can remember someone like Ogunbiyi. I can't remember most of the heads then, but I remember that when they had internal issues, some people left to go and start another newspaper. So those are internal crises that sometimes will happen and the organization will fold up. If you also look back at some of the Nigerian companies that started in earliest time, we remember Concord newspaper. Where are they today? Why are some surviving? Why are others not surviving? The airline industries. What are the conditions or factors that would have happened that will make most of the airlines in Nigeria, when they start, they fold up, even despite having professionals on board, but they still fold up? Are we saying that the resources on ground, in terms of human and in terms of human and non-human, were they not aligned properly? Or the human manager part of it, that's the human resources manager, in terms of the professional that is meant to drive the process, was this person not competent? So sometimes we need to look inward to be able to define what exactly an organization would need. So key part of maintaining stability will be the assessment of the process, will be assessment of the structures that are in place in the organization. So when you're talking about crisis now, you'll be talking about unplanned events, unexpected events that could happen that has not been looked out for, maybe in playing out case scenarios happening in the organization. I was reading when Albert Wigwe died recently, and somebody put it on the platform, bankers platform, one way or the other. I belong to one of those platforms. And they said, most times Access Bank in terms of asset base now has grown more than some banks that are like the same set. What has happened? They said it was the case of scenarios playing, that sometimes when they have meetings and everything has been set up properly, the management team will come up with scenarios that, oh, what if this were to happen? What if that were to happen? Can you show the tab? What if this thing were to happen? How would Access Bank be able to pivot? How would Access Bank at their present system be able to react to those things? For most HR professionals, so if you are here, one of the things you can do is to do role playing, scenarios planning. You've dotted all your I's, you've crossed your T's. Your organizational processes and system, even in talent sourcing, talent management. What if factor A was in place? What if factor B was not in place? What are the likely things that could happen? You need to start playing those scenarios. He said one of the things that helped Access Bank was the scenario playing. And most times when governments bring out regulations, especially towards the beginning of the year, most of the things that they had planned out during the scenarios, taking cognizance of and began to work towards, maybe by mid-year, those things will begin to happen. And then when other banks are running helter-skelter, Access Bank has been immune up to a certain extent. So that's why in terms of the asset base, in terms of the revenue and things like that, went higher than the traditional banks that were there before them. So when we're talking about crisis, it is just the sudden and unplanned event that poses a significant threat to an organization's operations. It can also it can also affect reputation, and it can also affect stakeholders. That means the people that are external stakeholders, the board of directors, the community. Most times, if you look at the oil companies traditionally, when they have oil spill, it affects them internally, the community. And if the communities were to make trouble, there is no way the organization can function at that particular site of spillage. So how will the HR officer or the HR professional handle such? Or a case of maybe a staff boss taking workers home and being involved in accidents. If it's brutal, if it gets to the point where it's ghastly, then you can imagine what will happen the following day when the Agberos want to take charge of the road. So those are things that we need to begin to look at. A critical moment or turning point that requires immediate action and immediate attention and decisive action. And I always tell people that the difference between how an organization is deemed to be is actually the leadership, number one. The management team has been represented by HR to drive the process, because talk is cheap. That is what we always hear. You can come up with the best strategies, but if there is no person that is driving those processes, it is going to fail. And for most organizations, what we have in context is that HR has been positioned as a superpower. We are the unsung heroes when things happen in an organization. Even when you don't have information, employees will still come back to you. So crisis could be both internal and external factors, could be both internal and external. Factors that are beyond your control, factors that are beyond and within the control of management and the organization as a whole. Some effects will be the threaten the survival of the organization. When I said threaten the organization, the going concerns becomes questionable. And this comes in the form of disruption in operation. It comes in the form of disruptions of routine. It comes in the destruction of processes. And then it comes even to making decisions, because sometimes we leave it too late because we've not had cause to plan scenarios, stages. And when such things happen, you know, like when some emergencies happen, before you recollect yourself or get yourself, takes a long time. So also with the organization, if it has not planned a business continuity plan and put it in process or put it in place where HR can always drive the process, HR in combination with other senior management team. Then types of crises that we could see generally that affects the economy or affects the world or affect the context of the fact that you and I are staying in a society. When you stay in a society, you are not immune from what happens in the society. Look at those spike floods that happened some time ago. They were saying flood. If you stay at around Mowe, Misheri North, there were floods that happened, and some people, I remember a friend of mine came to stay in my house, stays in Misheri North. So imagine if that person was a senior manager or an HR person. Financial crisis also involves significant disruption to organization financial stability. You have bankruptcy. We've seen many organizations taking loans, taking facility from banks and trying to buy raw materials, trying to increase production, trying to bring new products in. Sometimes when the indices are not right, the aftermath or the outcome is negative and it affects the fortune of the organization. Some banks take over the assets of the company. If they don't take over, it begins to affect production and even productivity of the workers. Because now you are you're meant to repay loans for businesses that you thought will happen very well. But then at the end of the day, it didn't happen as you planned it, but you'll still be liable for those interests that you're going to pay. So imagine if a company has collected 200 million for production, for raw materials. Look at the case of, I think it's Dangote that started this tomato factory. Everybody was like, oh, Dangote has come into this space. What happens after 1 year? Maybe because he has that financial muscle, the impact did not show up as much as it could be for somebody as a small business person or a small business owner. So the impact was not felt as much. But then Dangote and his senior team will know the difference. Imagine starting on to take a loan to start a business in Nigeria. And you started very well. 2 years down the line, government brings a regulation and a staff strength of like 100. What would the HR personnel start doing? When they can't meet obligation, what they will start doing right now is to do what? To start laying off. When they lay off, they come up with different ideas and strategies. Probably they will say, oh, let's lay off the first in, last out. I mean, last in, first out. They'll start that. They'll probably say, okay, let's go to town hall meetings and have that. What would they come up with again? Oh, let's reduce salary. Maybe from senior management team, can we take out 30%? From junior management team, let's take about 15%. But at the end of the day, how would the organization cope if it goes on for 2 years, for 3 years? I'm sure the natural drivers of process in that organization, they will not be motivated if the salary reduction continues steadily. Then we also have leadership crisis that stems from incompetence. that stems from misconduct of senior members of the organization. We have some succession planning that will happen, and then it will affect the business life cycle. There's some organization in terms of internally, even promotions. I've seen where, I think those were the earliest times that banks then were not so many in terms of what we have now. And they were promoting some people. And then the senior management team expected that the board was going to promote some people to executive directors, about 2 of them. But it didn't happen. It shook the foundation of the bank. I'm sure if it had continued, maybe CBN would have moved in. And what would have happened is, if you and I were there, we start sending out our resume, we start dusting out our resume to start living there. But before we do that, what will happen? We start going to HR to go and find out, oh, what is happening? What are they saying? What is wrong? Is it true that this happened? Was it of this? You know how people will come to you because they know that there's no way HR will not know 1 or 2 things. Because when they are deliberating, they will want to call in HR for senior management meeting. Then I remember globally too, in 2008, there was what we call subline mortgage. It has something to do with what I said earlier about the stock exchange. Most people in US that had homes, they had their own being taken over by undertakers. They had their homes being taken over by people that they are collected loan from, mortgages. And people's homes were revalued. And some committed suicide because they could not cope. Most of the big banks then collapsed. So imagine what the HR would have to contend with at that particular period. Then you have the natural disasters. You and I know what happened recently, less than 3 or 4 years ago. At the end of the day, I think the success story of COVID is what is still ruminating in what we're still using right now. The disruption that happened, the lockdown. Imagine then, before they locked down Nigeria, we were seeing Italy, total blackout. There were no vehicles on the road. I remember the Italy one very well. Then it now started spinning around to Spain. The China one, we know we were like, the empathy there was not as much because they cost it then. That was what people were saying. But then by the time it started going around Europe and then America, we were hearing figures, people losing their jobs, losing their lives. And then the chicken came home to roost when Africans were now African countries now started getting involved and we have started affecting us. And then people started losing jobs, even in Nigeria. There was nothing we could do. But then some HR of some organizations sprang up and brought out systems. And that was when we began to hear work from home. Oh, some people would do shifts. And I remember the federal government saying the oil and gas then that, and people were complaining that the prices of petroleum products will soon increase. And what did government do? Government provided security and said, okay, those people at the depot could continue. And I remember one of the decisions I had to take then was to give what you call the transport allowance to people that were going to the depot because transportation costs increased. So imagine if we're the HR professional at that point in time, what would you have done? Probably because of scarcity of funds, cash flow too would be affected, would be hindered. It would be imparted upon. But then what will the HR do if there is no fund? People will expect you to be able to have a listening here. They will expect you to be able to extend a hand of fellowship. And through it all, there were certain strategies that came out. We started hearing of employee assistance program. We started hearing of support. So when you talk about crisis and uncertainty, it affects the people and it affects the organization. So in terms of the people, leadership dysfunction. If the leadership at the end of affair of any organization bring periods of crisis, if there is no cohesion between them, if there is no support, if there is no trust or mutual trust between them, there'll be a disconnect, which will also translate down to the HR professional. Because when HR is hearing something from senior management and from the chairman or from the MD, it's another thing. The HR professional will be caught in between to know what strategy would she or he employ at this particular period in time. So imagine HR coming to you today because of the internal crisis. And then tomorrow morning, it has changed its decision and comes to you that, okay, so they've approved 3 days as work from home. And while you are jubilating that, oh, something is being done, another management, probably from another, what would I call it, click B, has happened. And then they are saying no work from home, nothing at all. Everybody needs to come down to the office. Reduce employee morale. We know what happened during COVID. Some people's salary were cut. Some people took a pay cut. Some people had to work longer hours. I remember some people were housed in hotels. Those ones were the ones that we said they were enjoying. But then they got disconnected from their family because they could not go home. They were stationed in some places, especially those companies that have guest houses. They housed their workers. The ones that were not housed, they were laid off. People were laid off. Some were not paid their entitlement. So imagine the effect if your friend was there, because you don't know if you're going to be the next person. So whenever there is a crisis, we also have workforce reduction. That is always given. Because we can imagine what has been happening in the last 3 months. I do interview and people come and they are telling me they've not collected salary in the last 3 months, 2 months, or they are collecting October salary in February, or November salary in February. And also because we react differently to things. Some can cope with stress, some cannot cope. Our mental fortitudes are quite different. Your mental stamina may not be as strong as mine. So where your own stretching capacity is, may be the beginning of another person's own. So if we are to look at a certain threshold, 1 to 100, some things will happen at 50, another person will be able to cope. And another will not be able to cope even at 25. So what kind of strategy would HR be able to deploy at such critical period? Sometimes in terms of employee well-being, there's some people when they hear negative news, their mind cuts off. And I remember during the period of COVID too, we were seeing people, you will hear all sorts of people slumming in the office. Oh, this one slum in the office. Oh, this one slum in the office. So what kind of program would HR put into place that will alleviate the worries, the concerns of the employees under their purview? And then by the time we started with remote work challenges, people started complaining that they'll be at their desks from morning till 7, till 8, till 9, because there was no break in between. Some people didn't have internal mechanism of measuring performance or even evaluating presence at the workspace from working from home. So it came up with its own challenges, and then health concern too. Because I remember then, I mean, it may be funny or honestly, I had friends that worked from home for like more than a year. By the time we were seeing them for some months, they are just like blown up, because the physical exercise, the physical activities were lacking. It was just more of home, go to church, go out. They could not relate to moving around in the office. Sometimes you don't know the importance of some things. You're moving from one floor to the next. Those are physical exercises. Those are things that could arrest any health challenges that may want to pop up. But because then they were more sedentary, health issues started happening. They were more comforting in terms of comfort eating, taking sugar. So health challenges came up with people working from home that could not control themselves. Then we're going to look at the impact on organization. Basically, what I've done is to look at the financial constraint, the operational disruptions, and then the regulatory or legal. So in more enlarged tune, financial losses. When crises happen in an organization, what are the first signs that crisis is beginning to start to rear its head? It usually comes from cutting costs. When you want to buy some certain things you've taken for granted, let's even use the case of toilet rolls. It may look as mundane as anything. Some organization actually cut those things off. I can't remember of recent, somebody told me that in one of the organizations we're doing OD, that's organizational development for consulting services. And somebody told me that, please, can you just help us include that? No. that the management cut off water is as bad as that. I said water. Is it that dispenser water, or they reduce the the water system in terms of the what do you call it, the seaway bottles? Did they reduce it? They said no. They cut it off outrightly. So in that organization, just come with your water. Then what started happening again? If you remember, for banks, mostly, I remember this last year, 2 years ago, when diesel went up, what was the banks? If they told us that banks were going to close by 4 or 3, people would have said, lie, not in Nigeria. We knew bankers to be able to close. I mean, we knew bankers with late closure in closing time. It was more of 6:30, 7. Then banks started saying that no, because the cost of running business started going up. So the financial part of it was that let's reduce operational costs. And one was significant enough, was the diesel cost. From 400, it moved to 800, 800 to 900. So you can imagine banks with how many branches. So the closing time was reduced. And for some banks that had market branches, instead of the resumption at 8, what did they do? They moved it to 10 o'clock. And if you remember, some banks with 3 branches, they cut those ones. They reduced or closed down some branches. So those are things that you begin to see the impact on the organization. And what will happen if there is a certain bank that was on that used to be on Okpebi. The same bank was on Toyin. The same bank was on Harlem. The same bank, less than how many kilometers from each other. At the end of the day, even up till now, it's just out of those 3 branches, is only one that is in that precinct of Toyin Street, if you know Ikeja very well. Then damage to reputation. Sometimes when crises happen, if they are not properly managed, it leads to negative reputation. Look at the issue of this particular tomato company. Is it, I've forgotten the name, these tomato paste people, Bosco or something like Erisco. A consumer bought a product, complained about it. Instead of them to manage it very well, they did not. So that sometimes those crises are things that, if properly handled, it would not get to that point of bad image. But at the end of the day, what happened? The organization, in terms of, look at how many people brought out on Facebook, Twitter, that they should boycott buying from that. There was also a certain bank, I think, gave out a loan to a car or a vehicle manufacturing company in Nigeria. They had issues again in terms of managing crisis. I think with the company, it was on a loan repayment. In between, they had like a breakdown in conversation. They didn't handle it well. And the customer decided to go on the social media. And what happened? Loss of confidence in the way, and then people started coming up with negative things about the organization. So those are things that, if not properly managed, it will affect the full cycle of the organization. You've seen cases where companies will have issues and they will boycott everything completely. And before you know it, the organizations just fold up completely. Disruption to operations, still the same thing, shortages, service disruptions, because when crises happen, everybody is thinking of survival. Look at COVID. I'm sure there were many organizations that just folded up. Look at the case of Ebola too. That hospital that thing happened, we only heard about the fact that the lady stopped it and died. But do you know what happened to the employees of that organization? Do you know what happened to their family members? They were subjected to a series of tests. They were asked to stay somewhere, isolated completely. But if those things were not handled properly, maybe that hospital too would have folded up. So sometimes in period of crisis, it depends on how the leaders are able to pivot, how they are able to adapt, make decisions quickly, and then be able to come back to reckoning. We've seen some organizations during crisis period, they kind of reduce production capacity. You won't see them going out of operations. Maybe 1 year after 2 years, you just remember them and, oh, this company is still around. So that means that certain things were done rightly, while for others, certain things were done wrongly. So it actually depends on the capacity and the capability of the people that are driving the business. And most times in organization, it is you and I they send to go and do those kind of jobs. You know, those jobs that they don't want to do, they always send HR. HR will be the one to do the dirty job, if we could use such words. So challenges organizational face during period of uncertainty. The economic instability. There's nothing you and I can do with Nigeria right now. What is HR doing in your organization at this moment? We all know the price of dollars. We know the price of pounds. We know what we bought a product at, probably maybe just went to the market 2 weeks ago. By the time you're coming in, by the time you're going back another 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it has more than doubled, tripled. So imagine the salary that is not going to change in the next 1 month, 2 months. What would you do? We now start prioritizing our expenses. Personal cash flow begins to get affected. So those, even HR itself or ourselves will also be affected. But most times we just believe that HR is a demigod. They will sort themselves out. And then when it starts happening, the demand for goods and services start reducing. You remember when they increased the prices, I mean, when they removed subsidy, the first 2 to 3 weeks, what happened on the road? What did anyone notice? Let's even talk about it. If you remember, the first May 31st was when, is it May? No, May 29 was when Tinubu took over. He said, oh, they've removed fuel subsidy. What did we all notice happened in the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks immediately after that incident? If you can remember, you can put your comments. I'll read the comments now. I'll read the comments on what happened generally. Okay, some people have said Innocent and GT Bank. Okay, yeah, that was it. I didn't want to mention the bank, Mr. Adeosun. GTB will sue you. Okay, so I'm asking every participant, what do you think happened during the period of fuel subsidy removal? May 29, what did we notice on the road? You were on the road, you were going to work. What happened really? Have we all forgotten? The roads were practically free. So when the roads were free, what happened? If you had a car, what happened? Were you taking your car out? Traffic disappeared. And honestly, I was praying that as if the road should be like that. People park their cars at home. Thank you, Victoria Azaria, for saying that. People park their cars at home. So period of uncertainties, everybody wants to keep the little money that they have. And at the end of the day, when that thing is not settled, everyone begins to get affected because it translates to even to the market people. And they will tell you, oh, is it because of this subsidy removal? Now, look at what is happening now. Somebody put an analogy down that, oh, they say it's dollar. But when dollar was 1,300, that a bag of sugar was 85,000. Now that dollar is 1,000 something, just to show that that person was trying to prove that it's not always dollar. Because this time around, dollar was higher. Then the price of sugar came down a bit. It wasn't in proportion to what the person was expecting. So challenges again that we always encounter is that we find it difficult to adapt to changes. When crises happen, even if they bring up solutions, most of us find it difficult to implement. Most of us find it difficult to assimilate and effect those changes. Take the case of Japa now that is happening. When COVID started and during that period, they were doing Japa, and everybody, most organizations began to increase salaries. But despite the fact that they were increasing salaries, we were thinking that the workspace, that people will start, getting jobs easily. Has that happened? They brought out policies and processes. Some banks increased their salary, added some juicy offers. People did not stay. When they changed some things in the organization in terms of approval in some places that, okay, what do you guys want? What should we do to start implementing so that people will leave? At least I'm used to the bank structures. Bank structure. Sorry if I'm using bank, because that's my former alumni. Let me say that is my fan club. And they were like, okay, come up, let's just do a town hall meeting. What do we need to do? They brought out the KISS model. That is, keep these things in the organization, like policies and processes. Let's improve. I is the improve one. let's improve this, let's improvise. They brought the one, let's stop this one completely. They listened. When they effected it, some found it difficult to move because they made some places up rather than have them as in one. Like branches were able to do some certain things, but because they were trying to manage the changes, they were trying to manage costs, manage disruptions, because people were leaving. The work of 3 people, you just go to a unit, bing, within a month, 2 people have left, leaving just 1 person in. So in order to make some things easier for those workers, some banks did a lot of internal adjustment. People could not cope with what was happening, even despite the fact that they were bringing in new information, new things, new reality came on board. But they were not easily implemented, because despite it all, we still need drivers of people, drivers of policies, drivers of processes. In fact, I can remember the number of bank officers that I had. Within a year, I had up to like 2 banks. I could count the number of account officers that they changed for just me, Rita Babalola, in my small space. More than 3 account officers in a certain bank within 1 year. And by the time you ask them, they'll tell you this one has traveled out, this one has resigned, this one has resigned. So even within the system, processes that were introduced to make things less difficult, people saw that no, they were just trying to buy their conscience because of that period, that after this trying period, they were going to take up those solutions or strategies. And then communication challenges. Where there is activities at that, when there are crises, the first thing that always have issues is the anxiety. People just wanting to know that they are covered. And then communication becomes difficult. Because sometimes if it's not done rightly and follows the due process, cascading down. I don't know for most organizations or some organization, I know the ones that I've worked and I know the ones I meet during my consulting. Most organizations will push information down from the owner or from the senior management team down to the middle. But then who drives this information system, the information or the communication circle, is HR. So even if HR is just a 1-man person, if it's a 2-man person, it is still HR that will do it. But for some organizations, because they don't have defined processes being entrenched, communication becomes a challenge. It now becomes whoever holds the information or was with the boss at that particular point in time. So it becomes, oh, they said. And when you start hearing they said, those kind of information, there is always anarchy going on in that organization and disruptions because there are no processes. So things begin to fall apart. So organization must begin to clearly defined communication channels, communication systems. When things happen in and begin to come in like this, what are the systems that we need to put in place? How do we navigate them communication-wise? Should we send emails? Should we send WhatsApp? So you begin to define the communication policies that will be suitable for the organization. And then you look at the state of technology. Rapid technology always also sometimes bring challenges. I remember another bank in particular, when the Gen Z, the Millennium and the Alpha generations were entering them, they did a reverse mentoring. You know, mentorship is always like the senior ones putting the younger ones through, or the lower level. But for this particular bank to be able to maximize for them to be able to maximize the capital outlay that they are pushed into the technology space, they needed to have a revised mentoring. I'm sure some of us have not heard the word. I had to look it up at that particular period it happened, because they found out that most of the employees were struggling. They were not used to automation of the system because they wanted to reduce a lot of processes that were cumbersome. They went full scale into technology automation, but they forgot to take into consideration the fact that the generational gap between them and the other organizations were different. They needed to learn how to manage those those generation gap. And that was when they came up with the reverse mentorship. So you working in an organization and having to contend with those kind of issues, if you've not been in that position before of leadership or trying to develop yourself, trying to adjust, you may find it very challenging to be able to cope with whatever situation that may come up all of a sudden when you have crisis. And this period, honestly, I don't know how HR is even coping, because HR is caught in between and we're all facing all the issues together. So I have listed how HR can foster a culture of resilience and adaptability. I also share one example, take the HR as a whole. I'd worked in terms of the management, are taking a loan. We had built an asset, and one of the assets of the organization was supposed to bet another according to the working plans, maybe 3 or 4 years after. All the plans, all the strategies were very good on paper. But when we started with the implementation, another suggestion was brought in terms of business investment. So the organization felt that, okay, I don't know if you know this thing they called it backward integration. Because we did A, B, C, it's only natural for us to do D in terms of business development. So when we voted, it was like equal voting rights. This number voted yes, this number voted yes, no. So the ownership decided to say, okay, my own vote is 2. And that was how that decision was for us to invest in another business, even though we were not consolidating, we had not yet consolidated the main framework. So when we went into it with all our chairs fully on ground, the money that could have been used to fund the ongoing business, we now started reducing the capital outlay here. So what we were taking for granted before, you finish, you go, fill from M, get a consignment of petroleum product into the country, vessels and all, we now started saying that, oh, we could not afford this. We need to reduce the volume of imports. And when the volumes of imports start happening as well, that means that your production capacity, your operational expenses, your finances, everything will start reducing on that front. So that means the staffing too. If care is not taken, you start laying off. We got to all those points. I was heading HR and I was heading business development. It now became crystal clear that we could not continue running at that. We either needed to stop pumping money into the new business and consolidate what we had, which was one of the, if we had continued at the pace we were, probably would have surpassed a Sahara, or probably would be behind a Sahara. But if they were to count the 1 to 10 oil and gas industry in Nigeria, that particular company would have been there. So at the long and end of it all, we needed to put a stop to one. But the management team still felt that in terms of returns, that particular new business, yes, it could. But sometimes when you're starting a system, you need to catch your breath first before you go into the new one. So we got to each salaries. We used to do something called motivational allowance. Motivational allowance was stopped. The next one was you cannot employ, bring in new people on board. So that one stopped. We didn't want to touch salaries, but there's no way the salaries would not be affected. Number 3, attention changed. You know, where you have most of the plans that we had done in terms of short-term plans, the medium-term plans, we stopped the medium-term plan, and then the short-term plans, there was no need to start it at all. Before you know it, salaries got affected. So as the head of HR, what I did then to get a bit of momentum in, and which was, I still told someone, I mean, it's supposed to be what I'm going to post tomorrow or maybe this week on LinkedIn, because somebody sent me a text and I was showing one of my team members and I said, oh, this is it. And I showed that text on some people. So what I did then was to create a momentum. I think it was the laws of leadership. I can't remember the numbers, like always create a momentum. And then we started what we call providing training and development initiatives. So what I suggested to the CFO was, let's get the middle level people, let's get the senior, not senior, the middle level people, the a bit senior, I won't call them senior staff, but you could not call them middle level because they were not full-time employees of the company, but they were senior people. And then we got some bits of lower people that were sharp, but the class strength was 25. And the first time we're going to do it, I read a book, I went online, I'd done a particular course on Coursera, that is Grow to Greatness. It was on Coursera, and I wanted everybody to have the mindset of what was happening because I needed to drive that. I didn't want people to be coming to work and what you see is silos of 2, silos of 3, silos of 5 discussing. So we'll come to work early in the morning, 8, 9, and everybody, because there was nothing really much to do. I had initially suggested we lay off, but the end of the company felt no. It was quite close to those people because I came from the banking sector. Those other people had started the business with him, and I could not get the normal professional initiative that I wanted us to do. One of it was to lay some people off, but they said no, we still need to juggle our ways in. So when I saw the practical inertia in the organization, people coming up in silos, talking like that, when I met the CFO, we came up with this, like I said, the leadership training. We call it the Leadership Academy. And maybe 2 weeks before then, I'm taking this course in Coursera, Grow to Greatness. You can check it. I told Mobola is there. I showed her because, I mean, I did a recent one for my team members just this Friday. I mean, we're taking the same thing I've done some years ago because it's one of those things that once you read it, it is quite engaging and you can practicalize it. So it was, growth is much more than a strategy. It is a system. That's the name of the course. It is a course that was done by a professor at the University of Virginia. You know, most of these Coursera things are usually like courses that happen in the United States universities. So I remember the name. It is Grow to Greatness. Growth is much more than strategy. It is a system. So we took it. We divided the team. We divided them into teams of 5, 25, like I said, 5, 5, 5. And we gave them this topic. You read this one, you read this one. And the remarkable thing is, you know, they could relate it because there were organizations that they needed to use as case studies. The case studies had already been, I mean, the organization had already been provided according to those case studies. So we divided them to 5. And in between it, motivation got boosted up again. And we always look forward to Mondays and Wednesdays, even though initially people were complaining that, you know, they, like if I say it in Yoruba, maybe some people will be able to translate it. So salary, want to make away, you know, those kind of stuff. You hear those negative things that could discourage you. And sometimes when you tell them to read, some will not read, but some will read. The members of its particular team, maybe instead of 5 people to read, only 3 people will be able to present, and the other 2 will tell you that. But at that point in time, honestly, motivation was really low. So instead of just waiting for what was going to happen at the end of the day, we filled up our time with reading about case studies. We started, after that program, we started going online. So what I now noticed was that even the employees were sending me developmental materials. They were sending me videos for us that, Ma, can we use this one? Can we use this one? So I had to create an internal training faculty. I told each of the team to give me one person from each of their teams. And that was how we ran that system for the next 6 months. At the end of the day, what translated was that people that didn't have the opportunity of presenting when the business was still a going concern had the opportunity to make presentation. Some of them had the opportunity to start reading because the reading culture became more enabled. The learning system, you know, when you're talking. And then 2 years after, when the company folded up, and these people traveled out of Nigeria, went to school in US, UK, what I started saying was text messages like, oh, thank you so much for forcing me to make presentation. Oh, this is my last year in my university and I'm being asked to make presentation. And then even one of recent was about Southwest Airline. If you are a popular person that travels out, there's something with there's a popular airline, Southwest Airline. And we use that as a case study. And maybe in one of the organization among the top 4, I don't know which of the meetings, they had to bring up this particular Southwest Airline. And one of them said, by the time she started discussing it, people wondered because she's not somebody to talk at meetings. And they were like, because she's an auditor, you know, sometimes you don't talk like those regular people. And then she started talking about this. And when they asked her, that was when, at that point in time, she sent me a text to say, thank you for this. So as HR, sometimes we come up with initiatives, we come up with strategies, we feel people don't value them. But honestly, we're enablers of growth. We're supposed to touch lives. And it may not happen. You may not get that thank you or gratitude because you want it at that moment. No. But the impact you would have made on people's life goes further on in their lives later on. Number 2, when we had crisis and we could not pay salaries, I became a counselor. I became a landlord, a legal what would I call it? A legal officer. Some of my employees could not meet up with their rent, their house rent. When they were having issues, I had to like, okay, if you know you cannot pay your rent, can you come and see me? When I saw that 1, 2, 3, and they were becoming like up to 7, I had to have a meeting with the CFO. And we came up with this. Let's call everybody in, even from those ones outside Lagos. Once you have an issues with we will be the one to call the landlords. We gave them letters to say we'll be responsible for that, okay, the organization is going through turbulence. I had to append my signature. The CFO had to append the signature. We will send letters to the landlords so that whenever there's money to share, honestly, we will sort out those landlords. Those were the practical things I wanted to show, but then this thing disappeared. I don't know how to get it because I got some of those things to show online. And then that's number 2. I began to speak to landlords. I told the CFO to, okay, you two speak, I will speak. So both of us will speak. And that was how we were able to, defray a bit of the anxiety of the employees. And they were so glad that we took that burden off them. So number 3, the ones that could not meet up with school fees. It was the same thing, speaking to proprietors of schools where their children were going to. You know, when you take out those burden from employees, it was like they handed it off from themselves and gave us to carry for them. As HR professionals, you have to come up with strategies that would help the people you are leading. So we will write those proprietors that, okay, don't worry, this first time, this person could not pay, but we'll take it up. Can they give us like 3 months? Let's spread it. Most of our employees, because of the kind of business we were in is oil and gas, they never found it difficult to pay school fees. So the fact that those employees were already paying their school fees of their kids without any problem before then made them believe us that we were going to be responsible for that, and which we did. So most times those strategies are not things that you will see in the book. So as an HR professional, you have to uniquely look at your system. What is it that you can do? So coming back to what I've listed here, as in what will foster a culture of resilience. Number 1, provide training and development opportunities. Build people up for capacity to do things that will help them in future. You need to know that, oh, in case some things happen in the organization, what kind of organization are you? If you are in an hotel, hospitality, what kind of things can go wrong in that kind of industry? How do you want to manage it if it happens? What is your staff strength? What is their capacity? What is the skills that they have on board at the current pace that they have? What are things that can help them to grow? How would you increase their knowledge, broaden their horizon? Is it training? Is it webinars? Is it workshop? Is it making them go online? So those are things that you can come up with during period of crisis and before crisis comes, because you don't wait until the day that this thing is going to happen, because none of us know when it's going to happen. But HR has to be prepared, and HR team has to be prepared with the employees in the organization. Number 2, we need to encourage open communication. Make communication accessible during period of crisis. People want to hear from the horse's mouth. This is not the period where you will be telling them you can't speak to them. This is the period that you have to come down low and be everybody's friend, because they need to hear the information from you. And you as the HR professional, you need to know how to manage senior management team, so that it's not like you are carrying your face as if the world has come down. Because sometimes there was this particular lady that during that crisis period, one of the things she told me was the reason they always wait at the reception whenever I'm driving in then was because they were always looking at my body language. And because my body language, the way I still carry myself was message of hope, they stayed. And even despite the fact we got to the stage that we started laying people off, some people, you lay them off, they still want to come in. And I'll tell them that, they'll tell me that, the bond, they can't stay at home. The money they don't have, they can't spend it at home. They would rather be in the office. They would rather be among their colleagues because of the kind of culture that we had created. So as HR professionals, we need to learn how to create multiple channels for communication. We can't do it alone. We need to delegate that communication channel to your backup, to your most reliable personnel, who may not necessarily be your backup sometimes. And then regular meetings. We were having town hall meetings. We were having sessions to discuss it. Okay, so what if this changed tomorrow? What should we do? What if this did not change tomorrow? What would we do? How would we be able to get ourselves up again? We were always communicating those kind of information. Number 3, like I said, the employee assistance program sometimes come in different form. And during period of COVID too, I know most organizations started with well-being programs. Some started with having psychologists come into the organization. Some had lawyers come in. Some had mental health support. Some had gym, go even to the gym. The organization paid for it. When people go to different places, there are ways of relaxing and taking their minds off what is happening. Organizations need to begin to look into it. Situations, because we react to things differently. So what will work for me may not work for the next person. It may not work for Etine. It may not work for Damola. So look for what will work for a significant number of people so that you can promote it. Then number 4, work-life balance. We all know how it is. Introduce steps, introduce strategies that will help alleviate those anxiety. The work-life balance, people started introducing flexible work arrangements. People started saying, okay, come in early, come in 4 times in a week, come in 3 times in a week. We started with different things. So when period of crisis comes like that, the HR, it behoves on HR to find way to ameliorate the stress and reduce it totally. If you cannot take it completely off, at least reduce it significantly so that they can feel safe, they can feel comfortable even at home. I know most homes sometimes had issues, especially with money during COVID period. Because if husband and wife are working in different organizations that have decided that they are going to take a pay cut, especially the hospitality. It was during the hospitality, during COVID period that I knew like most of them got affected. They were laid off. How many people were traveling? Even the cost of traveling them, Lagos State will say you should do, I've forgotten the test we used to do. They'll put something in our nose. You do it before you go. You do it 24 hours before you go. So there were different things that were happening. So as HR personnel, you need to look at your system and look at what will work for you. So another one is recognition and rewards. During period of crisis, look out for those leaders Look out for those ones that were not leaders, but were taking initiatives, taking advantage of sorting out issues. They didn't depend on their title, but they brought out solutions, they brought out initiatives, recommended for award, recognize them so that people can look up to them, knowing that, oh, in case anything happened another time, I also need to come with those kind of ideas. Because you don't monopolize knowledge. You tend to disseminate, make it something that everyone can have access to. So that when you're looking for those kind of desire skills, by the time you recognize people for it, you grow those kind of needs in certain people. They will strive to do those things. And then fostering supportive workplace culture. The workplace itself, make it conducive, make it inclusive so that everybody will feel a sense of belonging. Team bonding activities. It was during period of COVID. Even then, we're having virtual team bonding activities. At least I did one in one COVID. I mean, more than 2 years COVID. I did only one online virtual team building. So those are venues that HR can help. Then during periods of COVID, to frequent evaluations, frequent surveys, frequent feedback to identify what you're doing wrong, to identify where you need to change, to identify new areas of improvement, and then meeting with management to assess, oh, if we've taken this initiative, the next 2 weeks, what are we going to do again? Oh, if we had town planning, town hall meeting this time around, oh, we've decided we're going to do 1, 2, 3, and we've been only able to do 2. What should we do next? How can we get people motivated to do more? Should we send people? So those are things you evaluate and see the impact of your decisions before moving to another one. And then the business continuity plan. Every organization needs to have a plan B. What if fire happened? What if there's flood? What if there's a natural disaster that will not make everybody come out of their places? There are some banks that I do business with that every year they always want to send it out for you to review their process, so that because you are their vendor, they don't want to hear any surprises that maybe you are not able to offer the services that they've registered you for. So we need to look into it as organization, and as HR, that is beholds on you. So characteristics of organization with stability and resilience. There is robust leadership. When leadership is right, most of the issues concerning crisis are better taken care of. Tough decisions happen. Everybody knows to call HR. You know this song, when the going gets tough, instead of the tough gets going, it is the tough gets to HR. It is the HR they will call, not even the management team. But if the leadership has enabled, empowered HR to take expected decisions at the right time, HR will not be surprised in period of crisis or be immobile. You know, some people get because they've never been empowered, they've never been enabled. What you've not been given that power for, you cannot, when it comes to that crisis period, it can't work. It must have been, you've been empowered, you've been able to do it. Then effective communication, it has to be open, it has to be honest, it has to be timely. Communication is critical for fostering trust. Everybody wants to know that leadership is accessible. They won't go and meet the MD, it's the HR they will go and meet. Then agile decision making in terms of agility, in terms of flexibility. I was trying, the other one I wanted to show, I read on Boston, the McKinsey, because I was just trying to read. The McKinsey report that came out after COVID showed that people with structures, about 88% of organizations with structures, entrenched structures that had enabled leaders to take decisions, that had a culture of continuous learning, that had a culture of internal improvement, did well, and were more resilient, and were able to come back to operations immediately after COVID, compared to the organization that didn't have any of these processes in place. So for organization to always have it all those things must be in place. So what to consider during crisis? Transparency, leadership being decisive, clear communication, and action. It must be. You don't remain immobile, otherwise that decision that you ought to take at point B will be too late when you take the decisions, and things would have gotten spoiled or gotten damaged or gotten disrupted. So the opportunity cost of making that decision promptly is an advantage when it's taken at the right time, in the right place, and when it is really needed. I swapped this particular one with the organization I wanted to use. This is BP oil spillage. If you go online, this is one of the largest oil spill in history that affected the MD of the company went down, the senior management went down, and then some senior, it got so bad that they wanted to use the face of the MD of BP. It was British Petroleum and a company in Nigeria, Pan Ocean, that had this oil spillage in Louisiana in USA. But it was closer to the Gulf of Mexico, and they said it was the largest oil spill in history. But BP, apart from the 20 billion compensation they paid, they did not get the internal HR department involved in most of these things. And then they had to pay ×2. This was the initial 20 billion compensation. But because they didn't take the internal people into consideration when they were doing most of the strategies that came on, they had to pay double again. This thing went to as high as 40 billion. You can imagine $40 billion. So when the right things were not done at the right time, the cost of cleaning up, the cost of recovery, the cost of coming back to terms to engage the organization back to operations can be very expensive. And then the last one is what you and I know very well. This just happened less than 2 to 3 years ago. We saw what happened. We saw how organizations were pivoting to bring, vaccines. Most organizations that had processes, they survived. And some even went, that's why sometimes they say during period of crisis, some people will make money, some people will lose their job, some people will even get promoted, some people will even make more, and some people will lose money. So it now depends on the organization. What do you have in the place of it? And then thank you everybody for listening. That is the last slide. Thank you very much. So if you have any questions, I can take questions now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that very, very robust session, highly educative, enlightening, informative. Ladies and gentlemen, we are open to questions, or you have a contribution or a comment, you want to share your thoughts. If you raise your hands, we'll enable you to be able to ask your comments. I can see so many people sending in their appreciation.
Mr. Jimmy said my accounts officer because my portfolio is so is a lie. It's not. It's not. Yeah. It's because people were jackpotting. The talent pool, we know what happened to talent. People were just leaving the shores of Nigeria. People were just resigning. In fact, it got to a point, one of my friends told me that when they call her, they say, "Hello, ma, I want to come and see you in my office." You just tell them that, please don't come and see me. Just go straight to HR. Don't come and see me. Because she already knows what they were coming to say. Everybody is, let's go to HR. No, she said, no. She said, I understand. You don't need to come and greet me. I understand. Just go straight to HR. So people were predicting people that were leaving. So it's not because of my account was big. Lie. It wasn't as that. Okay, so sir.
So having breakfast, as we call it today. It appears nobody has any question tonight.
Okay.
And that's also a very good place to be. Just checking the chat box to see if there's any comments we may want to read out, or appreciation messages. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Adeosun, for having me.
Okay.
It's those ones making fun of me that my account is big that are there.
Oh, all right. I see someone, Malik. Malik, you have the floor. You can go ahead. Good evening, Malik.
Hello, Malik. Is he
muted? Good evening, Mr. Adeosun, and good evening, madam. I'm fine. Please, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we
can.
Yes,
I can. Yes, we can. I can hear you.
Okay, yes. Good evening, Mr. Adeosun, and thank you very much, madam, for that wonderful section. Honestly, you've been able to broaden my horizon and add some new things to how to effectively, during crisis, handle some issues, especially the one you mentioned, as in the trying to take off some burden from employees, the school
Yeah.
you mentioned and the landlord. It's a wonderful thing. Yes, I've had a similar experience where the company will give food stuff to workers. Like, okay, pending this, pending that. I think it's a wonderful thing. But my concern is this. In other words, for you to be able to do that, especially when you say they should come to office, then they now turn them to what I told you, turn them to school. You send everybody back to class to read and get themselves developed.
Okay.
If not because you have built a sound relationship and viral, relationship that is strong with your employee, I think it will be very, very hard to sustain or to have such thing. You said something like that. That you are not paying salary and you are sending us back to come and read. You must have done something very special. I think that is a lesson for all of us who are in HR. I've learned that even to pass a message or to make a change, it is not by policy. It is your attitude. It is how you are carrying on your people. That is when they will key into it without, any, for they will just believe in you. You also mentioned something that your staff will look at you when you are coming in. It shows that you have a positive vibe. I think that is important. Honestly, I've learned a lot of you. Like I said, Mr. Adeosun and Mr. Fola have been a very good support to me because I've been in admin for a very long time, transitioning to HR, and I'm picking a lot of things that are positive on this platform. Thank you, madam. Thank you, Mr. Adeosun. Thank you.
Okay, so let me say something. Malik, is that his name, Malik, right?
Yes, you're correct.
Okay, so sometimes we do certain things, we don't know people are noticing us, honestly. And when that lady said that, I mean, I had tears in my eye because I never knew the whole essence of why they stay at the reception. I just knew then I wanted to take a decision, and they came to my office, and then she just made mention that, do you know why we all stay there? That we know the time you come in. And I said, what? And then she now said, no, that when we see you, we notice the face, we notice the smile, we notice the dressing, we want to see if something has changed or whatever. But when you see, oh, you come, you say, everybody, good morning, yeah, let's go and do this. And that gives them a sense of comfort. But, it got to the point where I also needed to encourage myself to feel encouraged to be able to come to work all the time. And at that point in time was when I started with this leadership initiative that, okay, so let's do it twice in a month. And it wasn't as easy, like I said, to the reluctancy, those ones that will talk. In fact, there was a time I saw the notebook, because I told them to get a notebook. One of them wrote, when they wrote, like those notebooks, then they used to have name, time, and as I said, whenever they call us, the leadership, they call it night school. They were just making fun. But I guess when they started seeing the impact on themselves, they began to fall into place. So that's it. Thank you. Adeosun,
Right,
I think yes, sir.
Yes, this is a very convenient time to call it a night.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Rita Babalola. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for how you help shape the HR space, add value to organizations, communities, and people. This has been an exceptional performance and presentation, and we owe you a lot of gratitude. We wish you well, and we hope
so much,
for the best in the coming days, both for you and for Becoming It. Ladies and gentlemen, see you another day. Good night, everyone.
Bye.